So in this course, we're talking about discipleship with purpose, and we're going to look particularly at this concept of innovation. Now, sometimes when we think about innovation, we think about coming up with crazy ideas and being super creative. Innovation can go that direction, but there's something even more important about innovation. It's rooted in a process that actually is akin to something that we call practical theology. Now, our friend and theologian Andy Root says that practical theology is the need to interpret the where of Jesus Christ in our experiences of the now. So what your job is in practical theology is to really try to interpret what's going on with your students, with your ministry, with your volunteers, what's actually happening, and how do you faithfully help them take a next faithful step in their discipleship as their pastor, as their mentor, and as their youth leader. Now, the great thing is that there's ways for us to think about practical theology that has a goal, and the goal is ultimately faithful action. And we can think about this in 4 different ways. First of all, to be faithful in many ways just represents what we believe. We want to be congruent with our beliefs and what we're actually teaching and guiding young people in. And then secondly, we want it to be effective. Obviously, we want to embody what we believe. The way we express our ministry, the way we express ourselves has to be rooted and connected with our beliefs, and we want that congruency. Thirdly, we want it to be contextual. You have a unique context, a unique ministry, unique students that have unique needs. And so part of us thinking about practical theology is keeping that in mind. And then fourthly, we want it to be communal in the sense that our following of Jesus isn't just about us. It's about our community that we're a part of and how this all works together. Now, practical theology has 4 moves, and that's all you've got to remember. And they start up in the right-hand corner of this slide. We're asking the question, what's going on? And then we're asking, well, why is it going on? And then we're asking, what ought to be going on? And then we're asking, how might we respond? When we work through this process, we have a thoughtful way to assess where we're at and where we need to go. So in the first step of what's going on, this is really the place of encounter, and it's the place where we're asking descriptive questions. We're not trying to interpret. We're simply trying to observe what's going on. What are students saying? How are they behaving? What are they reacting to? What's important to them? What do we notice about their interactions? What do they resonate with? These are the things that we're paying attention to, and we simply are trying to describe them, which then moves to the second move. And the second move is really asking the question, well, why is it going on? What are the reasons for behaviors, actions, conversations, sayings, emotions, all that comes with that. And this is where we draw upon research. This could be the social sciences or theology. And this is the place where we're asking the question, well, why are these behaviors happening the way that they are? We draw on developmental literature. We draw on sociology. We draw on cultural literature. We draw on theology as well. And what it allows us to do is begins to ask the why question behind the what observations that we had before. And this helps us have a deeper sense of interpreting what's going on. That allows us to move to the next move, which is really the theological turn. This is where we're asking the question, well, what ought to be going on? What is the ways in which we aspire and hope young people step closer to Jesus, to what Jesus is inviting them into, to the best life that God has for them? And so we draw on our theology, we draw on the gospel to pull from that and have a vision for where we are going, which then finally leads us then to the 4th step, and that's ministry. So how do we actually activate this? In light of what we've seen and what we've assessed and interpreted, in the vision that we have theologically as we think about the gospel, what's our ministry move that we need to make to get there? Now, as you might imagine, when we don't do this method of practical theology, things can get a little awry. For example, perhaps you've experienced a situation where you've seen something go on in your youth group, and right away you're like, oh my goodness, young people are acting, saying, doing something. We need to respond, right? And so what can happen is we can skip the other steps in practical theology, and then we become a reactionary ministry. Sometimes we perhaps read an article online online, we hear about a study, and we freak out about what all quote unquote young people are doing. And again, we can be quick to respond without taking time to really reflect on our students and also reflect on things theologically. And again, this can become a quite reactive sort of ministry. And so we're sort of chasing and reacting after the latest issue that is raised by the media or whatever else is there. Now, what also can happen is sometimes we can start with what's going on and we can quickly jump to a theological solution, right? Young people, they just aren't coming to youth group anymore. That's because they don't love God. If they just accepted Jesus into their hearts, we wouldn't have this problem. You see, what's happening there is we've sort of short-circuited the process and we've dehumanized the theology and the gospel, because now it's just turned into a simple solution to a complex problem. And that's not going to help us either. Sometimes we start with theology and then we're just overwhelmed by all the studies and the way that youth culture is constantly changing. And so sometimes we just end up doing nothing because it is so overwhelming. The good news is this, is that when we follow a practical theology method, asking the question, what's going on? Why is it going on? What ought to be going on? And how might we respond? You can see from the model that this is a circular element. It's not linear. It's something that we continue to work at. We continue to ask these questions. And through that, we develop a thoughtful ministry. We resist being overly reactive. And we actually have purpose in discipleship that can make a difference in young people and make a difference in the world. And that's what we're leaning into.